So this year's color changing smartphone from Vivo is here. The V25 series is going to give us the color changing smartphone experience this year, and this is the Vivo V25e, the cheapest of this series. And in this video, let's review this device. Before we start our video, let's give a quick shout out to our today's sponsor, Mars2. Mars2 is a group of smartphone shops located at the 3rd floor of Satarkhan complex in Kumilla. No matter which smartphone you need, they have all of the brands covered. You can buy your desired smartphone from them at a fair price. Details about them are in the description below. So considering the price of this smartphone, this thing sits at the bottom of the mid-range segment of the Bangladeshi smartphone market. And for this price, we are getting a 64 megapixel main camera, the 32 megapixel selfie camera, 8 GB of RAM, 128 GB of ROM, a high refresher display, and the latest and greatest software experience. But most importantly, the unboxing experience. So in this beautiful box, Vivo has given us all the basic components we need for a smartphone, including some accessories. I really like how the box looks and feels. Opening up the box, the first thing you will get is the smartphone, obviously. We'll keep it on the side. Now the next thing you'll get is a TPO case with some documentation inside. It's a nice little case. Then we have the USB-C cable, the 44-watt fast charger, and 3.5mm earphone. Although this phone doesn't have a 3.5mm jack, they have given us the adapter to USB-C. It's a complete package. So for the unboxing, Vivo deserves a 5-star rating, obviously. Now let's move on to the design and build quality of the smartphone. Man, you can't just go wrong with this design. This thing really looks stunning. On the back, this thing features a frosted back glass, and this thing can change color in the presence of UV light. That's not meant to have the sunlight, but it can also do in any other UV light. In this nice camera bump, this thing features 3 cameras. We'll be talking about that just a minute. It has flat side rails. On the front of the smartphone, we have a beautiful 6.44-inch 1080p 90Hz display with a water drop notch on the top. The overall build quality is really good, and the hand feel is really great. Although this phone weighs only 183 grams, it feels solid on hand. Vivo has done a really great job with the build quality of the smartphone, but although I wish it was more seamless from the screen to the body. There is a bit of seam between this. Now let's talk about the wow factor of the smartphone. As you might know that it comes with 2 colors, the diamond black and the sunshine gold. And this variant here is the sunshine gold, but we also have the diamond black, which in my opinion, it looks polished, more polished than this one. But the wow factor is in the sunshine gold version. If you want the wow factor, I mean the color changing factor, you have to go with the sunshine gold. So the fact is that if you go on the direct sunlight or any kind of UV ray hits on this back panel, this thing changes color. By default, you might get the aqua and the golden tint, but as soon as you go to the direct sunlight, this thing produces a brighter orange color, which really looks very good. And you can set up some patterns on it to get a beautiful design which will persist for a few minutes. So this thing actually really cool. But now let's talk about some serious stuffs. The display is a pretty nice 1080p display with the peak brightness of 1300 nits, which is really very sweet because you can use it on broad daylight quite easily. The display also supports 90Hz refresh rate, which is very great, and you might expect the high refresh rate display on this price segment. And there is a toggle in the settings app where you can switch between the standard smart switch and the 90Hz. But in my testing, I have seen that it always on the smart mode. It switches between the 90Hz and the 60Hz all the time, and if some app doesn't support that, it don't refreshes at 90Hz, it goes down to 60Hz. It's not LTPO but smart switch. It's good for battery life, obviously. The only downside of this display, I would say, is the water drop notch on the top, which is not expected in 2022, so that's demerits for this display. By the way, if you want a hole punch, you have to upgrade to the V25 Pro, which has a hole punch on the top. That would cost you some extra, and I guess that's not available officially in Bangladesh, so you can buy officially, but it's available. You'll find it some other shops. So for the connectivity, we have 4G down here, although rest of the lineup is 5G, but this phone particularly has 4G connectivity only because the chipset, So if you want 5G, this is not your phone. On the bottom side of this phone, we have the SIM tray, which is a hybrid slot. You can use either 2 4G SIM cards or a single SIM card with a micro SD card, which is pretty good to see in this phone. Next to that, there is the main microphone. After that, we have the USB-C connector and a single bottom 5-inch speaker. The speaker is pretty loud though, but the sound quality from the speaker isn't that great because I found that the sound quality is kind of cold. There is lack of bass and depth in sound from the speaker. On the right side we have the power button and the volume rockers. On the top we have the secondary microphone, and the left side is flat. Now for the camera hardware, they have featured a 64 megapixel sensor as the main shooter of the smartphone, which does have OIS, which works really great in taking photos and even in the videos. We'll be talking about this just a second. The other two cameras are kind of useless, but they are there. And on the front we have the 32 megapixel selfie shooter, which also does a good job in terms of taking selfies. Now on the camera app we have all the basic functions and modes and some extra exclusive features from Vivo, which was similar to the Vivo X80. We have reviewed it earlier. You can check it on the pop-out menu. Now let's take a look at some image samples and video samples coming out of this smartphone. So the only functioning rear camera of this Vivo V25e does a pretty good job in terms of taking photos. As this camera has optical image stabilization, the photos comes really sharp. The dynamic range of this camera is really good. I am really impressed how they're done with the color science of these cameras. It's pretty similar to the flagship Vivo X80. I'm really impressed at that. And as it has the optical image stabilization, the zoomed in shot also looks pretty good. Now in terms of portrait mode shots, I'm not very impressed. For a human face, it throws away the details. It makes the face so smooth that sometimes the images are barely usable. But I like how the green came in the portrait mode. Now in terms of selfie, the 32 megapixel selfie camera does a really good job. By default you will get the selfie portrait mode, but you can switch back to the normal mode. Now in terms of nighttime shot, the camera still holds up thanks to the optical image stabilization, which does help with the nighttime shots. By default it will take more time to process the image to get a cleaner image. There is also a dedicated night mode, but I have mixed opinion about the night mode on this Vivo V25e because in some scenarios it does a really good job, but in some other scenarios it actually ruins the shot. But for in normal mode, the nighttime shots are good, I would say. Now in terms of video recording, there is no 4K recording option, which is sad. You know, the SoC's limitation. But the noticeable thing here is the image stabilization. I'm really very impressed at the image stabilization that this phone provides. On the performance side, we have the MediaTek Helio G99 on the smartphone, which is based on 6nm architecture, and this chipset was pretty good and efficient throughout my usage. I've done the benchmark testing on this phone, and this thing has made a respective score on Geekbench 5. I've also done the CPU stress test on the smartphone, and I was wondered how well this G99 performed on the smartphone, and there was no overheating after the CPU throttling test. I'm pretty much impressed with the performance of this G99 on the smartphone, and in real life experience, this thing also speaks, which is really a very good sign. You can only push this to limit if you are a very hardcore gamer, and yeah, in that case I don't recommend this to you. Now for the biometrics, this thing has a under display fingerprint reader, which is pretty nice. It's responsive and accurate, but it sometimes misses. We also have the software based face unlocking, which really surprised me. Like any hard condition, this thing actually recognizes my face. I am really impressed at the software behind this thing, but that's not very secure obviously. Now this phone is powered by a decent sized 4500 mAh battery, which actually lasts me a day of moderate usage with 90 Hz on. So I'm really impressed with this standard sized battery on the smartphone because this has been very efficient, so you can easily pass a day with this. But obviously the battery life won't be the same over time because, you know, lithium ion batteries degrades, and if you want your phone's battery to last longer, longer, then you can check my this video on the pop-out menu over here. I would help you to maintain the battery health for a long time. Now for the charging, this thing supports 44 watts of fast charging, and you know the charger is included in the box. I would like to highlight this thing because you know many companies are removing the charger, so Vivo take a good approach. Now for the software side, this thing features the FunTouch OS 12 based on Android 12, which is a really very good experience in my use cases. I really like how this skin works on top of the Android 12 features. I didn't find that much of a bloatware inside this UI, and the entire UI was very smooth and clean. I really like this UI on the smartphone. Good job, Vivo. Now this phone retails roughly at 35,000 TKs at March 2, and for this price segment I would say this is a very decent smartphone. If we give up the wow factor, this thing actually lacks in certain places. Like this thing doesn't feature an ultra-wide camera, which is expected for this price segment, but they didn't give us the feature, and the water drop notch is kinda does not fit for this smartphone and the era, so I'll cut a point there. And that's pretty much it. So let me know in the comments what do you think about this Vivo V25e. If you want to make any purchase, consider March 2 from the links in the description below. I'll see you soon with some new interesting videos. Till then, stay good, keep good, and keep doing incredible things. And yes, of course, keep watching Incredible Victor.